Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. This is part 3 of my talks on the Dharma. In part 1, we considered the difference between what is called the real Dharma and the Dharma as formulations or as scriptural teachings. In part 2, we looked at the need to follow a path and how Buddhism has developed, rather briefly. Today, I'd like to consider the range of the Buddha's teaching in terms of the way that it's taught, very simply, according to our great lineage patriarch Gampopa, according to a teaching he received through the Kadampa lineage and brought to Tibet by the great master Atisha. The Buddha taught for 45 years. He didn't proselytize, he didn't set out with a program, thinking here I'll teach this, there I'll teach that. On the contrary, he taught in response to people's requests for help. That is the ethic of the Dharma. Not to impose oneself on others, but to help if your help is requested. And so the Buddha taught responding to questions from ordinary people, from yogis, from people with responsibilities, kings and ministers and so on. And over his lifetime, his own followers developed. They meditated, they practiced, and they came with questions based on practice in all of its stages. And this gives us his teaching. All of those hundreds, thousands of teachings fall into 3 areas depending on the 3 types of audience. The 3 main types of Buddhist, which are called the 3 types of Purusha. Purusha is a Sanskrit word. It means somebody with capability, with potential, with power. These are human beings with a real possibility of doing something very positive and useful with their lives. So we look at 3 types. To be a bit cynical, a modern business person might call these the 3 client bases of Buddhism. It gives us the idea. The 3 main types of mentality, 3 main types of people that the Buddha's teaching can really help. And that these days, our lamas and rinpoches and masters' teachings can really help. And we can look at those also using a bit of Shakespeare. To be or not to be? That is the question. So our first type still very much wants to be. They want to live, but to live well and happily, to live a decent life, to be good human beings. They're not yet at least interested in renunciation, leaving the world, seeking something other than the world. Out of his compassion and kindness, then the Buddha, and these days our teachers, really want to help people live a better life. And so one part of the Buddha's teaching gives us ethical values based on a life of peace, non-violence, generosity. Generosity not in simply the sense of material generosity, charity, but a life which is truly given to caring for each other. And also, the Buddha helps us in an extraordinary way there by telling us things we can't just work out for ourselves. About karma and reincarnation. Of course, karma means our deeds, what we do with our body, to each other, to other beings, to the environment, how we use our speech as a healing thing, as a weapon. So the Buddha shows not only the immediate consequences of our actions on ourselves, on our mind, on our fellow human beings, but the long-term consequences on our next rebirth and the rebirth afterwards. In general, showing us the deeds we can do now, which are not just good in themselves, but which will help in the future us to have what I'm sure nearly everyone wants: long life, good health, friendship, safety, not to be in a place of war, a place of famine, a place of disturbed seasons, and to have human affection, kindness coming back to us, to meet wise people, and so on. Our deeds now, how we relate to each other and the world, are writing the story of our very own future. And so the Buddha teaches karma, cause and effect, and these basic universal ethical values of respect for life, trying to find wise, peaceful, cooperative solutions. Those teachings are not just good for each individual, but when you have a society of individuals living according to those values, it is a good world, a world where people care for each other, support each other, work for the common good. That's our first type of Purusha, somebody who wants to be. The second type, not to be. This isn't the majority of people, but some have had enough of worldly pleasures. And what they realize, and it's a very deep realization, is that worldly pleasure always depends. It depends on something other than you. It depends on what other people do, how they relate to you. It depends on the world, on the weather, on what's happening in the environment around you. It depends. Understanding this and the fragility of that and the huge price tag of worldly happiness. Some people think there must be more, that there is too much suffering involved in striving continuously to have or to maintain the worldly happiness. And there must be a deep spiritual peace and happiness. That second type of person will follow the basic guidelines, of course, of karma and good conduct. But they'll be looking for a way to, first of all, undo the story of karma and rebirth in samsara because of karma. And they'll be looking for a way of finding a peace and a happiness that comes from within and that doesn't depend. So their main path is one of meditation. Meditation and the wisdom of the four great truths about what is suffering and its cause, and freedom from suffering and its cause. Freedom from suffering being nirvana. Their path is by its very nature one of withdrawal from samsara into a world of peace through meditation. And this gave rise to the great monastic communities of monks and nuns and recluses and hermits, looking for this inner peace. And during the time of the Buddha, during his 45 years of teaching, many hundreds and hundreds of his followers found this definitively. They became what are known as arhats, So we see after the Buddha's passing, 500 of the most famous arhats gathered together to try to establish the Buddha's teaching. They're the second type of Purusha, those who renounce the world and seek nirvana as being the end of samsaric suffering, the end of the process of rebirth driven by karma. There's a third type of powerful human being, and this is the bodhisattva. Not only do they want to get out of samsaric suffering, they want to help everyone, and they aspire to attain all of the qualities of a Buddha. Because a Buddha is not just someone who got out of samsaric suffering, full stop, and entered into a state of mental peace, withdrawn from the world, other than the world. A Buddha is someone with every possible quality of mind, wisdom, love, compassion, and tremendous skills in many areas to help other beings that we sum up through the 10 powers of a Buddha, the 18 distinctive qualities, the 4 fearlessnesses, and so on. Whereas one can attain the state of arhat within one lifetime, as many people did during the Buddha's life, to become a Buddha is a much longer journey because it is bringing the human mind to absolute 100% purity and perfection, bringing out every possible quality of mind. That's what a Buddha means, a mind as good and as perfect as it can be. The teachings that help somebody do that involve engaging with life, not simply withdrawing. Life has to be faced and worked with so one gains all of the strength needed to be able to be in the world, not of the world, but in the world, to help people as much as possible, and to gain strength in the face of every possible circumstance so that wherever you go, whatever you do, you're always happy. You don't need an artificial state of meditation. You don't need a special environment and circumstances, monastic or retreat. Your mind is definitively free and so strong and so good that wherever you go, everything is always okay, and you have so much to give to everybody, like our great living masters today. This third way is the way of Mahayana, it's the way of the Bodhisattva, and there the aim is to become a Buddha. So we have 3 ways: the Purusha, who wants to be, to carry on being in the world, they still are willing to accept the samsaric price tag, but they want life to be as good as it can be. A second type, who doesn't want to be anymore, their path of renunciation, they want to become an arhat, free of samsara. And then the Bodhisattva, who wants to become a Buddha, to be able to help everyone. When we look at those 3 types and the sort of teachings that they need to be given to help each of them on their own journey of evolution, then we see a few interesting points. First of all, although we define these 3 types, probably all 3 are present in most of us. Certainly in me, I can see all of them. One bit of me still loves life and wants to be, but wants to be happy and healthy and have friends and so on. Another part sometimes is totally fed up with the round of life, the repetitiveness of existence, and doesn't want to get drawn into yet another seductive situation, another journey of desire, another fight, another journey of anger, another bit of jealousy and competition. It's had enough of all of that. Just just longing for peace. And there's another part sometimes that's just overwhelmed with love, loving care, natural loving care for everyone, and so moved by the suffering, left, right, everywhere, that you just long to be able to do more to help. And certainly in our Dharma centers like Samiling, if somebody comes to a good teacher, the teacher will address whichever of those areas or all of those areas is in the person in front of them to try to help them to evolve as a human being according to their own wishes, but also according to their capacities as well. Another interesting point is that very often those three types of human beings form a sequence. By doing the good things and making the good karma, gradually we mature into a deeper vision of existence where we no longer want to be bound to samsara. We long for renunciation, and then as the mind extricates itself from the samsaric world, then it realizes that as human beings we can be loving, compassionate servants for our fellow human beings. So the three fit together. Once we understand those three types of audience for the Buddha, then we can understand how in the course of history the Buddha's teachings which respond to those panned out or developed into the various Buddhist schools, some of which emphasize some of those teachings more than others. But that's maybe the topic for what looks like it will be part 4 of this series of talks on the Dharma. Thank you very, very much for listening, and maybe see you soon for part 4. Wishing you, wherever you are, a splendid day. Bye-bye.